All right, this is Chris Schlarp. I'm here with Steve Wynn.
Hey, Chris.
Hey. So, a couple of days ago, you live in New York.
Yeah.
A couple of days ago, you were there. Then you fly out to the West Coast. You do some, I'm just putting this together through,
Yeah, please help me, because I think I'm trying to piece it all together. It's been a whirlwind.
So you come out here, you do some like Paisley Underground reunion, kind of like rehearsal thing. I just saw a picture of you and like Susanna Hoffs.
Radio session. The main reason I'm out here is to do your session.
Right.
And that we were talking about this for a while now.
Yeah.
And it was
A year or so.
A year, and trying to find a time when the 4 members of the Dream Syndicate were available. That was difficult in itself.
Right.
And we finally found this period, which was great. And there's a record called 3x4. It's a kind of a Paisley Underground record, a mutual tribute record of the members of the Paisley Underground, being the Dream Syndicate and the Bangles and the 3 O'Clock of the Rain Parade, all covering each other, doing 3 songs,
Gotcha.
one each by the other band. So it's called 3x4. It was supposed to come out today.
Really?
Today was the original release date, but it came out in a limited form on Record Store Day in November.
Okay.
And now that's been pushed back to February, I think, to give more time to. Oh, I know why. They sold a lot more than they thought they would sell on Record Store Day. Had nothing left.
Gotcha.
So they needed a longer break to make exactly.
Right.
So I thought, okay, maybe we'd do interviews. Well, once I knew I was coming out to do your thing, and the fact that all the other members of the scene live here in LA, I said, hey, if you want to book something, I'm here. So I got here on Wednesday. The long shaggy dog story, the whole thing is my mother, who is a lifetime Angelino, grew up here in the late 30s until just a few weeks ago, moved from LA to Oxnard.
Oh, no kidding.
So first things first, I landed, went straight to Oxnard to check out the new pad.
Right.
Fantastic. Cruised around Oxnard, ate some food.
Teatro's out there.
Yes. It's funny you mentioned that, because I went out before she moved out there, when they were thinking about living out there.
Yeah.
When I was here 3 months ago for our show at the Roxy, my mother and my stepfather and I went out to Oxnard for the day to check it out, to see what we thought. And the first thing I saw was Teatro.
Yeah.
And I said, pull this car over.
Yeah.
I need a picture right now.
No, I had to I took a little pilgrimage there with my son. We went up the coast over the summer last year, before he, jumped into his senior year of high school, to go look at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo for him for college.
Oh.
And so we had to pass Oxnard to get there, and I was like, hey, we were literally listening to Willie Nelson.
No. That record?
That record.
Wow.
And so I said, hey, listen, I mean, it wasn't an accident. I just listened to that record once a week or something.
Do you really?
Oh my God.
That's a big one for you.
Oh,
okay.
It's there was that period, I think Lanois and Mark Howard made, I think, just one masterpiece after another. And I don't think it was any coincidence, I have this scientific algorithm that I think of when I think of brilliance or greatness, and I'm I'll take one part out and say, well, what did this artist do without these people, and what did they do with them? And I don't think it's a coincidence that they did Time Out of Mind and Wrecking Ball and the first Brian Blade Fellowship record on Blue Note, and I mean I could go
I don't
on
know
and
that
on.
one.
Oh man.
Okay.
Unbelievable.
You got to turn me on to it, okay.
They did it at Teatro.
Okay.
Incredible. I mean, I think it's one of the best. It's one of my favorite records of all time. All instrumental. Jeff Parker is on electric guitar. Brian Blade obviously on drums, and Dave Easley on pedal steel. Just extraordinary. You never heard a jazz ensemble with a pedal steel, first of all, and a guy who's a total virtuoso.
Yeah.
But all those records made back to back to back to back in this compressed period of time. I just think there's so few people who've been able to pull that off. It's not just as obviously for those guys it was as a producer and engineer, but I always think of that maybe 4 or 5 record period that Joni Mitchell did from Blue through Hissing of Summer Lawns or something. I mean, you know what I mean?
You hit a stride. You just and you did. There's almost no reason for it. You just you're not looking down. You're in air. You're levitating, and it's great. I mean, I've had periods like that myself where it was just For me, it was 95 to 2005, and I made about 15 records in that 10-year period.
And that's like, you're looking at almost like 1.5 a year.
It was like that. And I was making with different projects, solo records, a couple I made in Spain, which I liked quite a bit. Just different projects, and I was just cranking them out, and it was so easy.
Yeah.
And I liked everything I did, and I think it's some of the best work I ever did. I like things I did before and since, but that was just a period where, like with the Lanois thing you're talking about, where it was effortless. It was easy. I could work with anybody and do anything, and it was going to come out, I think, really good.
Right.
And then, that kind of period ends, and you still hopefully do good stuff, but all of a sudden it's labored, and
right.
And you got to work.
Break.
You got to work twice as hard to get half as much. And
right.
think, well, what happened?
Yeah.
And then it comes and goes.
Well, that's interesting that you kind of brought that up, because I think about that a lot. The way that I look at it is it's just like the muse, right? It's kind of like, what are we following the muse? Are we allowing the muse to like move through us, inspire us? And I could be wrong. See, now I've never had like great success, right? I've not financially anyway. I think artistically, yeah. I've accomplished a lot of things that I would like to, and I have a million more things I'd like to do.
Yes.
But I always wonder if, let's say that you take an artist and you say, man, they had this period and it was just brilliant, right? And I think, wow, they were just following the muse, they were in the stream. And then something happens. And then it's like maybe they'd never get their footing again, or they get it years later when someone kind of new comes into their circle and maybe appreciates what they do in a new way, or
figures out what to do with them.
Yes,
makes them relaxed enough to do it.
Yeah, and I just finished this Stevie Nicks biography, and I thought it was kind of interesting because she had so many different periods where she felt like, I think collaboration is really important to her, I think, and she always wanted like Tom Petty to work with her. She wanted to be part of the Heartbreakers, and
I heard that. Right.
Yeah. Like she said, she'd leave Fleetwood Mac if Tom Petty would let her join the band, and he was just like, "No, can't. You got a thing happening." But when I think of somebody, like that, like they need a certain feedback loop. I think, whereas perhaps maybe personally or emotionally destructive as her relationship with Lindsey Buckingham, maybe. They have this circuit of this artistic circuit.
They did. Yeah.
So I think there's lots of different things. Sometimes as people get caught up in drugs, I think the thing that I think about the most, though, is that people trade money for the muse.
Well, I think about this a lot because, when we were, I'm going to speak for you, but when we were all starting, music was the most important thing.
Yeah.
It was number one. Loved the love of music. I love the Leonard Cohen line, remember me, I used to live for music. And it's a great line because, I think he was really speaking about himself, and that was when he made I'm Your Man, which was kind of his record where he came out of from the wilderness. In a way, he'd been making good records. But when you're young, if you're a musician, everything's music. And then you have kids, or you have a studio, or you have a spouse, or you have stamp collecting, or whatever it is. Music's still there, but it moves down to number 2 and number 3, and you still love it, but it's not quite the thing. So I think that's part of it. But also, I think that you talk about collaboration earlier. I think I really thrive a lot in collaboration, and I'm being surprised. So a lot of the music I make now, it's why I'm here with you right now. It's like it's trying to find people I can work with who will surprise me and excite me. So I've been, in the last couple of years, working on another record in Spain with a producer, working on a record in Norway with another producer, and I do things like this all the time now, looking for something to trick me, to throw me off my guard.
Yeah.
And I will say, for example, that with the Dream Syndicate, the new record that's coming out, and the one we made a couple of years ago when we did the show with you, I labored over those words for days and days and days and wrote 10 times as much as what I needed. And I like what I got, but it was an effort. I will be very candid and say the lyrics for the 2 songs I'm doing with you, which I like quite a bit, I wrote in about 10 minutes each.
Yeah.
Because I was
then again, lyrics
I was excited.
I sang them straight. I sat down with my guitar and I was just like, oh, like this is it. Like immediately.
I wrote those with my morning cup of coffee in no time. And I'm going to say, and I don't say it to brag or anything like that. What I'm saying because I heard your music. I actually, and I try to do this when I work with somebody, is to hear it for the first time when I'm ready to write. So I heard it, I put it on, I said, great, I hear a title. Then again, I said, wow. Then again, okay, what does that mean? And I just, it came out very quickly.
I know exactly. I write so much music. I write music in 2 distinct times. After breakfast, at the breakfast table, I have my acoustic guitar. It sits to my immediate right. My wife sits to my right. My little girl sits to my left, Isabella.
Great.
My son sits across from me.
Great.
We wrap up breakfast. The food, the coffee, like the plate's still there. After we're done, I'm talking, we're rapping. I grab my guitar, just start playing, and it's like every morning.
You're fresh.
I'm sharp. I'm excited. I'm with the other part of my circuit, which is my family. That's the other kind of like the yin to my yang, perhaps. You know, it's like, there's another song on this record that I wrote with Jerry David DeSica called Lightning. And the original title for that was just music and family, because those are the 2 things that are the thing that keeps it spinning, you know?
Okay.
And I think sometimes, you know, I had a family pretty young. I was a father when I was 20, and I, you know, I have 3 children now. I'm 41, and there were a lot of decisions that I had to make early on when all I wanted to do was music. And I drove a truck instead. You know, I was a truck driver for 12 years.
I knew that about you, right?
And the great thing about that job for me was that I was out in a truck. I was getting physical exercise, but I also had my mind to myself all day. So I could write songs. I could write lyrics. I could look out over the Pacific Ocean and say, man, this is, I could pull over for a minute. And let it kind of, something happen. I wasn't sitting behind a desk, because I'd had those jobs, you know, and I always felt just completely worn down. I had no creativity after a desk job. You know, people are calling you, and you have all these. It's just like I feel like somebody's always standing over your shoulder. You know.
Yeah, I get that.
So it's kind of interesting that for me, I had to make that. It was just, you know, I wasn't complaining about it. It was just, that was my life. You know, I had to take good care of my family. But while I did that, a lot of people that I felt like were my contemporaries, I saw their careers kind of like spike. And then, you know, most of them kind of just like sort of, they'll fade away. You know, then they move on to their family part of their life. For me, it was like strangely like the calibration of both of those things. You know, like in the summertime, I'd still try to go on tour because my kids were on summer vacation, and they'd go with my ex-wife for, you know, 3 weeks or something, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't have the kids, I'll go on the road. And then you meet people when you do that, and I never had like the full effort of the star maker machinery, you know, working on my behalf, because I was always this sort of...
Joni Mitchell.
Right, yeah. I was just always this kind of like weirdo, like I'm playing free jazz or experimental music, and then I'm starting to write songs, and I'm doing some, you know, a lot of producing. So I think for some people to like latch on to what you're doing, they need just repetition, right? And after
or silence or a void. And you talk about truck driving, you know, and you know, I never write songs on tour because there's just so much input and so much noise and so much activity, and even though a lot of the day is spent looking out the window like you're doing in the truck, there's still so much music. There's no... I know for me, for writing, I write to fill an emptiness, and it's something that's not there, which is hard now in the world, because there's not a lot of emptiness, because you've got your phone, and you've got your computer, and you've got Facebook, and you've got the news, and you've got Trump saying this every hour, and all these things happening. You have no moment where you're empty.
Right.
And you got that from driving a truck. I get that from living in New York. And I think, and when I talk about that 10-year period where I was writing a lot, it's not a coincidence that starts the year I moved to New York. Because I think living in New York where I walk so much, I mean, I walk like 5 miles every day, just doing nothing, just hanging out. And that's when I write. I'm out there. Suddenly, I'm not on the computer. I'm not.
Right.
There's no one around me. There's a million people, but you're not talking to them. All these things that really helps. I don't know. The ideas come.
It's so funny that you say that because I remember, I think I heard a quote from someone. They said, like, I never felt so alone until I moved to New York City.
But it's true. It's true, though. I know it's really true.
Yeah.
That great, the picture from Midnight Cowboy of Dustin Hoffman and John Voight,
right.
walking down the street and they're surrounded by people, but you just zoom in on them. It's a great shot. And it's like that. There's so many people. You're invisible.
Yeah.
Which is great.
So you grew up in Santa Monica. Is that right?
Born in Santa Monica.
Okay.
I moved all around L.A. I lived mostly on the west side.
Okay.
But I lived in L.A. for most of my first 34 years. I went to school at UC Davis, so three years.
Kind of started playing music. That's where like some of the bands started coming together for you.
It's where I met Kendra Smith.
Okay.
And where I had my first new wave band with Kendra and two people, Russ Tolman and Gavin Blair, who ended up in True West, another really good band.
Okay.
We had a very average but productive new wave band called Suspects, and we played a lot of, we would drive to San Francisco and put them at Buhai Gardens, every other week to 5 people, but I was writing the songs for the band and cranking them out. So it was kind of my training ground, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
That was good.
You need that.
You need that, and also the great thing, it was a small college, small town kind of thing, Davis, California, and we all worked at the radio station there, KDVS, and I was the program director, did a show every week, and this was 1977 to 1980 when punk rock was happening, so it was exciting, and the new records were coming all the time, and new Clash records, new Buzzcocks records, whatever, and we just were caught up in the whole thing.
Yeah.
So it was kind of, I went to Davis to get my college education, and I got my education in new wave.
Right.
I got my education in punk rock. I got my education being a DJ and being in a band and writing songs. So, it worked.
Yeah. And so then from Davis, you end up coming back to L.A. and kind of then is that the point where like Dream Syndicate kind of like starts to come together for the first time?
Well, Kendra and I moved back to L.A. around the same time. She's from San Diego.
Okay.
I'm from L.A. We left Davis. We both came to L.A., but not the idea of doing a band at all. We stayed friends. We hung out. But, I figured, hey, I'm 20. This music thing is about over now. And I worked in record stores, a couple stores in L.A., went to UCLA for a while, DJ'd at clubs in Hollywood. So I saw my sights on music, but, realistically, that I would be, where I am now, 58 years old and playing music for a living, that was not in the cards.
Yeah.
So I remember at the time, the one thing I wanted to do, because I didn't like the single I made in Davis. It was called the Suspect single, which is, in retrospect, not that bad. But it was kind of a chirpy new wave record. And all I could think was, I want to make one really good record that I can say, when I'm an older guy and I'm a grandfather, I can say, well, I did this record. And look, you can hear this. And isn't it? It's wonderful. So I made a record called 15 Minutes with a song called That's What You Always Say, which ended up being a song that we recorded for our first album. I did a home 4-track version on my TX 3340.
Yeah.
With one of those Dr. Rhythm drum machines.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Oh my God, I loved this. I had a Kendra's Mustang bass, a Dr. Rhythm, and my Les Paul, and a chorus pedal, and that was it. I recorded this single with the idea that I'm going to put this out, and right about the time I put it out, I was playing in a band a band that became Wednesday Week, which made a few records. A couple sisters, Christy and Kelly Callan. They reminded me of the Shags, which when they found out what the Shags sounded like, hated me for saying that. But I meant it as a really, like, you guys sound like the Shags, which means you're my favorite band ever. They're a little eccentric, and things like melody and rhythm and arrangements were very random, which blew my mind.
Yeah.
We needed a bass player. We put an ad in the Recycler.
Oh, yeah, I remember the Recycler.
Yes, we put an ad in the Recycler.
Yeah, the old paper.
Looking for a bass player who liked whatever And Carl Prokoda showed up and played bass. After the rehearsal, he came up to me and said, when I walked him to his car, he said, I'm not too big on them, but I like what you do. And we started playing together, and we just hit it off. And I told Kendra, I'm playing with this guy. He's a really weird guitarist, and he plays a lot of feedback, but it's pretty cool. You ought to play with us. And she did. And the three of us would just jam on songs in the basement of my dad's house. We'd play Susie Q for an hour. We'd play That's What You Always Say for an hour. We just having fun.
Yeah.
And I think at a certain point, we started, we still didn't think we'd make a record or play shows, but this is fun. Kendra said, I'm friends with the drummer from Human Hands, which was an art rock band from Pasadena. They had records out.
Yeah.
They played the Whiskey A Go-Go. They opened for the Feelies at the Whiskey. I mean, this is a band, to me, that meant they were the Beatles.
Mm-hmm.
When you're young, it's like,
right.
These guys, I saw them on stage at the Whiskey. I heard them on...
The divide seems like a chasm.
A chasm.
Yeah.
So when she said the drummer from this band might want to rehearse with us, I said, well, that'll be a joke. He showed up at our rehearsal, came down, he'll be here tomorrow, and he came down with his drums on a rainy December night. Came in with the personality which you'll see and which I've grown to know over the years, which is very deadpan and not always demonstrative, but just kind of intense on what he's doing. Played with us for 2 hours, packed up his drums, and left. Right, well, that's the end of that. He's never going to want to. We just wasted his time to go from Pasadena to West LA to play Susie Q for 2 hours, but okay, I call him 2 days later as a courtesy just to say, hey, thanks for coming out and playing with us. I know you made a cassette on your boombox. Did you listen? He said, that's all I've listened to for the last 48 hours. That's the best thing I've ever heard. I want to be in your band. And suddenly we're playing with a real guy on the LA scene. And from that point on, it was a matter of weeks and a couple months before we were playing big shows in LA and opening for Wall of Voodoo or opening for the Psychedelic Furs or getting signed to Slash Record in a matter of weeks and months.
Yeah.
It happened so fast.
But all of that kind of like work and all those hours of just playing songs over and over again is part of what sort of like prepares you to like have some momentum once all the pieces come together.
I think you're right. And I think it also comes down, this circles back to what you're saying about the collaboration with Daniel Lanois and things like that. You find the right people to work with, the right people where all of a sudden it all makes sense. That wasn't going to happen to me if I played with 3 other people who weren't where I was at.
100%.
I couldn't have forced that to happen. I lucked into 3 other people, a group of 4 people, where we were on the same wavelength, wanting the same thing, where actually we were happy to play the same 2 chords for an hour, and that God made us happy, and we knew how to do that. And that became our thing. Noise and repetition. And at that point, that was a novel thing.
Right.
That you would play a song for that long and just go off into space.
Which is funny because I almost think of that as more like no wave, right? Like that New York kind of no wave.
Yeah.
Kind of. I mean, even some of those like. Man, I always loved like DNA and Mars and like EXG.
Yeah. Ardo Lindsay is one of my favorite guitarists.
Yeah. But I always think of that kind of like. That almost they brought in like that kind of like kraut kind of rock, like just that really simple, dumb, strong, unrelenting beat, and then it's sort of like I was talking to a friend of mine the other day when we were mixing a record, and there was a guitar part that was sort of just a little strummy but a little bit off from kind of like the downbeats. And so I said, well, let's throw a whirly on it, and the whirly goes on the downbeat every time, and then all of a sudden it sounds like it pulls the strum closer to it, even though it doesn't. We didn't change that. Wow. But I always think in terms of like when you have like a drone, and then you put a beat on top of it. Now it sounds like the drone is playing to the beat. It's not. They're 2 completely distinct things, but there's this interesting thing that can happen when you have a group and that is doing that in real time. time, and you just and then I always think sometimes like a great drummer is like they have like a dumb confidence. You know what I mean? They never think like they can't do this thing.
Yeah, right.
Whereas like the one time as soon as you have like this musician that starts thinking like, uh-oh, I'm flying, they fall out of the sky.
Right. Right.
But like if you have like the right drummer, the whole band starts to think like we're all invincible.
Yeah, that's true though. With the right drummer, you are.
Isn't that?
Yeah.
It's funny, I'm kind of obsessed with drummers, like in general.
I married one, so yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I guess I am
I'm
too.
a frustrated drummer myself. I think. I think like it was always when I grew up, my brother got the drum set. I was playing clarinet, which I was terrible at, and then I finally got a guitar. My brother never practiced, so I'd go out in the garage. And in high school, I was doing like gangster rap sessions, and I was playing in the school gospel choir. So
that was your thing that you were into, or just as we fell into?
Just like I was playing, I had music classes, and the guys that I was in class with, they were doing gangster rap stuff. This is like the height of the Chronic, Dr. Dre, Long Beach, like Snoop Dogg, Warren G, like. We was like Long Beach. That was what was happening. That was the scene, And a lot of the guys that I went to school with, just down the street from here, Jordan. I remember one day, and I'm in there in class, and we got a music class together. I'm playing guitar. They're like programming beats, and they were like, "Hey, you want to do a session tonight? We're going out to Inglewood." And I was like, "Yes." I didn't know what the fuck we were going to do. I didn't know I didn't know who these people were even really. They were like classmates, but I didn't know what was happening. Ended up going out to this little makeshift studio in like an industrial, like across the street from the Forum.
Oh, wow.
Industrial warehouse.
Okay.
We do a session.
You could be wondering what's in store. That's not an area you would necessarily go to.
Totally. Yeah. I'd never gone there on my own at that age, Anyway, long story short, we ended up cutting like 2 songs, I think. One song in particular was called Respect, and it was by a rapper named Problem Child. The guy who was producing, quote unquote, the session ended up saying, "Hey, I played piano and some guitar," and he's like, he gives me a Porta Studio, Tascam 424.
What, that night? Just
that night. And he goes, "Hey, listen, just keep writing some more hooks."
That's great. Okay.
So then I take the Porta Studio home, and that's when I kind of just start going crazy. Like I think I was 16, 17. I started just fucking plugging everything into that. I'm playing.
You had never done this kind of thing before?
Never.
Okay.
Never. Plug my guitar into it. I find out a mic or two that works. I find some mics at school in a milk crate that say LBUSD on them, and I go up to my teacher and I'm like, "Hey, what? I have a recorder at home. Can I use these mics?" They're like, "Oh, those mics don't work. Take them." I take them. They were AKG 451 EB condensers. They just needed phantom power to work. So
no kidding.
Little by little, I started learning, and I
love that.
Man, I use those mics. I had no idea how good those mics were. It's just like straight out of the gate. Like those are my 2 microphones.
Yeah.
So I start playing my brother's drum kit. I'm like overdubbing like clarinet because I didn't have anything. I just had like a
bouncing
guitar.
back and forth. It was a 4-track.
Yeah. And I still have it actually. And but that was kind of like really for me when I think I started really to become obsessed with like the idea of like sound and recording, and I was always a huge music freak, even leading into that. But I think the switch over from playing, quote unquote, playing clarinet, that was terrible, to like playing guitar, which I was also terrible at, but at least I could understand, like, I started to understand how music worked a little bit. It was impossible for me to make sense of it with clarinet because it was only a melodic instrument. There was no harmony. You couldn't play a chord.
Yeah.
You played one thing by yourself, and it was like nothing was there.
Right.
Right. But you start playing guitar, and it's like guitar, piano, or like these like traditional folk instruments. You can accompany yourself.
You can write a song. It's all you need.
Man, it changed everything. You know. And then it's like now I have this 4-track, and I remember. I don't know. I haven't thought about this stuff in years, but I ended up graduating. I was working. I had a job in high school. I was working as a dishwasher at a Baker Square restaurant, So then I'm working at a bookstore, like Crown Books or something, and I started taking a couple classes at Long Beach City College, and I gave a guy that I was going to school with one of these weird songs that I'd recorded with like distorted electric guitar and clarinet and drums and stuff. And I remember, I think he was maybe a little bit of a, he was into psychedelics or something, but I remember he listened to the song, and a part of the song that was totally accidental but cool sounding, he just jumped up and ran off. Like,
what, just he couldn't control himself? He just lost his mind.
I never saw him again. He left with my tape,
He left with the tape?
It was a tape of the mix. Like, I had the original,
Okay.
But
what do you think was happening? Do you think
I don't know, but in my mind, for me, it was like, oh shit, like music could do that to somebody?
Right, yeah.
Like, I don't even know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And this guy like flipped out and took off.
You could come up with 10 different explanations for that. I'm not sure which one I would even think of right there.
Yeah. But
so you still have this song? Do you still have?
Man, I probably do, I guess.
I want to hear it.
Yeah, man, I would be mortified, I'm sure, but especially because over the years, I just keep trying different things. Like, even from session to session, I won't use like the same drum mic setup, or I just try to. I listen to people's music or their songwriting, and I'm just, as a producer, right? I'm just so critical of everything. I've like ruined like my entire family.